Good morning, Facebook Live. Camera seems like it's on a different angle. Okay, bizarre, maybe I need to move forward. Alrighty, so my name is Kara-Leah. You probably know that because you're on my page already. And this morning I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about the core practice of Tantra Yoga and my understanding, and also the number one function of the teacher. So I am teaching weekly Tantra Yoga classes now here in Langholm on Tuesday nights, and so this is why I'm sort of diving more deeply right now into what it means to teach Tantra Yoga. I have been practicing it for a long time, but I haven't actually stepped down to teaching it until literally last week. And I'm also doing a 6-week course at Om Yoga Studio starting next Tuesday at 11 a.m. called How to Live Your Yoga and Rock Your Life, and it's going to be based on those principles. So the core practice of Tantra Yoga is really simple. Like at its most simple, it is consciousness. It is being conscious, and we need a way to we need to be able to find our way into that consciousness. And so the practice is to simply throughout the day become aware of oneself while breathing, not to breathe in any other different way, not to do anything differently, but simply to notice one breathing. So as you're watching right now, I invite you to do that. As you're listening to me, as you're watching the screen, just to start to become aware of what your breath is like on the inhale and what your breath is like on the exhale, and just see what that feels like to maintain your consciousness, your awareness on your breathing while you're also engaged in watching a video. And bingo, like that at the core is Tantra Yoga. It is simply becoming conscious of yourself in the moment, in every single moment, which is so much harder than you might think, because so often we are on automatic. Like we live on automatic, and it's that living on automatic that begins to separate us out from the juiciness of life. And the beautiful thing about Tantra Yoga is that it is all about how do we experience this human life in a way that reduces our suffering and increases our pleasure without us becoming attached to or chasing pleasure. And so the interesting thing about the path of Tantra Yoga is that what I've noticed is the more that I really drop into this way of being and this way of living, the more that I experience deep pleasure from the simplest of things, like just the way my gloves feel on my hands in the morning when I slide them on, or the way that there's this tremor right now in the puddle in front of me, like I'm in my car and I can see this tremor, and it's just like, and so it's affecting the reflection in the image, and there's something about that tremor, and as I really tune into that tremor in the puddle, it's like I can begin to feel the tremor inside me, and there's a sense of aliveness, and that's really what Tantra is all about, is dropping more and more deeply into the essence of every single moment. Now what begins to happen as we allow ourselves to do this, as we allow ourselves to drop into the truth of each moment, into what the moment really feels like, is that we can't avoid the truth of our experience anymore. And for those of us that have tended to disconnect from our body and from our body wisdom, or for those of us that have tended to avoid emotion, this is why the practice can be really challenging, because once you begin to settle into each moment, once you begin to become aware of your breathing in every moment, then you begin to become aware of how each moment is actually making you feel. And if you're working a job that you hate, it gets a lot harder, because in order to be conscious in the moment and really waking up to what is going on, to really feel, you have to begin to notice. You can't avoid how much your job doesn't feel right, and it becomes harder and harder to literally show up and force yourself to do something that no longer feels aligned. And if there's a lot of attachment to the job, for example, because of various factors, whether it's a financial reason or whatever the reason is, it becomes a very, very uncomfortable place to be. And this is why it feels to me like aligning to truth and to love have been also cornerstones of my practice, because the practice of Tantra Yoga itself is going to take you into truth. And so you have to be willing to feel the truth of your experience moment to moment. And then that means that you have to be willing to feel uncomfortable and challenging emotions as well, because we live in duality. Like, you are not going to be able to access deep pleasure from the subtlest things in life until you are willing to feel deep pain from the subtlest things in life. And that's the tantrika, that the person who studies in Tantra, lives Tantra, is that you are able to embrace and hold all of these things, all of the things. And in that embracing and holding of all of these things, you know yourself as that which lies beyond. You know yourself as consciousness itself. You know yourself as the I am. And then there's this interesting thing that I've noticed that's starting to happen, whereby it's almost as if the intensity of feeling alive becomes so extraordinarily beautiful that what triggers that intensity doesn't matter so much. So in real practical terms, what that means is that intensity can be triggered by joy and bliss, right? Or it can be triggered by grief and loss. And there is a sweetness and a beauty in both. And so the distinction between pleasure, beauty, joy being good and grief, loss, etc. being bad begins to soften. And that's the space that I'm beginning to sit in now. And it's a really extraordinary place to visit. So that is the number one core practice of Tantra Yoga, as I understand it, is simply challenging yourself to become aware of your breathing over the course of your day. So when you're doing the so-called automatic things, like you drive automatically maybe, or you automatically make your lunch in the morning, or you automatically get dressed, or you automatically have a shower, and your mind's doing one thing and your body's doing another, and you're just on autopilot, is instead of that is to begin to choose to become aware of your breathing, even if it's just for like 3 conscious breaths. I mean, I've got a friend who sets a timer, and at 3:33 every day he stops and does 3 big breaths, and that's his way of beginning to breadcrumb into conscious breathing, into that core practice of Tantra Yoga. And so when you're beginning this practice, you could say, right, 3 times a day I'm going to become aware of my breath, and then you choose what those times are. You attach those moments, and you can do it to time, like at this time you set an alarm on your phone. Or you can hook it to specific actions that you take every day. So it could be simply, when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to take 3 really deep breaths, and I'm going to feel into how I'm actually feeling in the moment. When I walk out my door and get in my car, first thing in the morning, I'm going to take 3 breaths as I sit there and really feel into how I am before I drive my car. So that would be my takeaway for you. That would be my suggestion, that if you really want to wake up, if you really want to experience the deepest pleasure and bliss in life, with the understanding that with that comes all of the other experiences, start to become conscious of your breathing throughout the day. Choose like 3 moments to do that, and make that commitment that you will really tune in. Okay, so the number one function that a teacher performs for a student. So when I'm teaching students, on one hand, I'm giving them the actual technique thing to practice. But what I'm really doing now with students is that I am seeing them. I'm really looking, allowing myself to look at the people in front of me, and really allowing myself to fully receive them and to feel them for who they are, so I can sense what's going on for them in terms of where their ego defenses are, and where their patterns are, where their hooks are, where their attachments are. And my number one function as a teacher is to see my students clearly, and then to reflect back to them what I see. And that doesn't mean I tell them, right? Because who am I to know? Like, what I perceive that I'm seeing is still only my perception, and I still have my own filters, my own biases, my own masks, right, that I'm working through. So it's more subtle than that. And when I'm seeing a student, my job as a teacher is then it's almost like being a scientist, exploring, testing things out. It's like I test out what I'm seeing by asking them a particular question. And when I ask them that question, the response that they have will either affirm my intuition, it's not even an intuition, it will affirm what I'm seeing, or it will help me to gather more information so I can see more clearly. And when I ask them a question or get them to ask themselves a question, what it does then is when they ask themselves a question and they really listen, they begin to see themselves clearly because the question leads them into themselves. And so I don't need to tell them anything. Don't need to explain anything. I simply need to encourage them to ask the right question. And because they have that desire to know themselves, right? I mean, that's why they're showing up to do the practice with me. When they ask the question and when they truly listen, they can't avoid the truth of that moment. So that's my function as a teacher when I'm sharing Tantra Yoga. Yeah, techniques, whatever. But really it's to act as a mirror for my students so that they may see themselves clearly. Okay, so I'm going to wrap that up for now. If anyone has any questions, there's a couple of you that are watching that I can see. If you have any questions about this, about the practice of becoming conscious throughout the day by tuning into your breath in the function of a teacher, throw them in now. I am teaching Tantra Yoga every Tuesday here in Langholm, Auckland at 8 p.m. If you're interested in coming along to class, the first one is free and $10 for unwaged as well. So I'm going to start doing that for people who are unwaged. It's $10. Send me a message and I can let you know details like where it is. And then next week, Tuesday at 11 a.m, I'm starting a 6-week course at Om Yoga Studio in Mount Wellington in Auckland called How to Live Your Yoga and Rock Your Life. And it's going to be based on Tantra Yoga. Really, we're going to be sitting in a circle and just sharing what's going on for us. And then I'm going to be working with what's going on with everyone in the group through the lens of yoga, looking at yogic philosophy. And then how do we use the framework of yoga in order to really rock our lives, okay? So my name is Kara-Leah. Beautiful to talk to you guys as always. And I'll see you on the next Facebook Live. Big love.